So I made the mistake once of telling a producer that I wasn't one of the creatives. In my head, the people who make the art are the creatives, and me being outside of that, I wasn't one of them. What I do wasn't creative. And she stopped and looked me in the eye and said, "Never think you're not creative. It takes a creative mind to understand the creatives." And that changed my perspective on production ever since. That producer was Jenny Rim, an executive producer who's worked alongside the legendary Glen Keane, whom you may know from Pocahontas, The Little Mermaid, Dear Basketball, Over the Moon, and of course, Tangled. What we'll cover today, project management, may not sound all that creative. And to be honest, it's a pretty dry subject, but that's exactly the perspective I want to challenge today. As we go through today's chapters, my hope is that I'm also able to show you the colorful side of production's role. That despite being data-centric and driven by metrics, that there is an art to production management. Because what I learned over the years is that although what we do, emails, schedules, reports, are all text and numbers, there is creativity required in the gathering of all that information, and even more so in being able to communicate all of that data in a way that others could understand. And it is often that human touch, the ability to think outside formulas and spreadsheets, that make the boring work pretty fun. So paint that picture with me today. So you want to be prod. Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Frances, your forever friend in prod. I've been in the production department for over 12 years. I've had my PMP certification in the last 4. I've been a production coordinator for all the departments in the pipeline. I've been a production manager in VFX and animation, and I've worked in feature film and episodics. And eventually I created So You Want to Be Prod to continue support for production everywhere. This video is part of a 5-week prod summer camp, Production-101, where I'll be going over the fundamentals of production management in VFX and animation. For today's agenda, we'll be covering project management skills in production. And our goal today is to expand more on production's purpose and to go beyond the admin work that most people know production does. And by the end of this video, my hope is that you would have a better understanding of project management within production's responsibilities. And to do that, we'll be covering the different types of show information that production has to know, understand, manage, and deliver. Some of the topics I will talk about are these. Chapter 1, what is project management? Chapter 2, show lifecycle. Chapter 3, show information. Chapter 4, show schedule and resources. Chapter 5, show metrics and reports. Chapter 6, roles and responsibilities. At the end, our last chapter, we'll again go over the same roles and responsibilities sheet that you saw in the previous video, but this time we'll highlight the project management skills related to each of those tasks. With project management skills being one of the most transferable skills of all industries, chances are, no matter your background or your previous experience, you already have what it takes to be in production. You already have these skills. Someone just has to show you. But I bet you already have what it takes to be in prod. Alrighty, I hope you're all set up. You've seen day 1, so you know that project management is just one of the 3 pillars of production management. You've done your gear check, so you've downloaded all of the course materials that you need, and you were able to access the course page with no issues. But if you didn't know that, all of our videos have a complimentary course page that you can access and follow along. It has links to complimentary bonus materials to supplement all of the lessons we cover, all of which is free to access through the link below, or you can scan this code. And I highly recommend you to follow along with the course page, just because in the interest of time, I won't be able to cover all of the information that I want to share, but I still really would love for you to have that information handy, and you can access that through the course page. We'll aim for this to be about 45 minutes with a 5-minute break in between after the first 3 chapters. And in the end, if you still have questions, make sure to click on the FAQ at the bottom of the course page, or you can reach out to us on our Discord. You can join our live Q&A at the end of the summer. Alrighty, let's get started with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. What is project management? When people say admin work, what they really mean is project management. So let's talk about what is a project. What is the thing that we manage? So a project is a temporary endeavor that has a start and an end date that produces a unique product or service with interrelated tasks to achieve the same objectives. So in a way, a show production is a project. You have a start of the show and then a wrap date of the show, and it produces a unique product. The unique product is the show, it's the movie, it's the series, it's the episode with interrelated tasks. So all of those departments have tasks, but they all are connected, all of which to achieve one goal, which is to deliver the show. So project management then is the structured approach to accomplish the activities needed through specific knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. And as a bit of a recap from our previous video, project management skills are the skills that are focused on the administrative tasks and the ability to plan, execute, monitor, and deliver a show and its deliverables. And it's important because production's role is to deliver the show. Production's role is to support a team by enabling them to communicate information between departments, between all stakeholders, and to help them deliver within a given constraint. And if you're curious what those tasks are, you can download the complete roles and responsibilities sheet, and it will list over 100 tasks that is expected of production, especially for production assistants and production coordinators. Now, there are 2 approaches to project management, and this is according to PMI. PMI is a Project Management Institute, an internationally recognized association of project managers who set the standard for PMs globally. So those 2 approaches are 1, predictive project management, and 2, agile project management. So what are those 2? So we'll start with number 1, predictive project management. So this is also known as traditional or waterfall project management. And it's a scheduling approach where you organize all of the tasks and activities sequentially in a specific order. One has to happen before the next one begins, for the most part, and executing activities as planned. So the style of predictive project management is it's linear or sequential. So one task needs to be completed before the next one begins. It has constraints, which means there is a set scope, timeline, and budget that is allowed, and that is determined at the start of the project. It is more change averse, so they don't like changes to what was set at the baseline, so what was agreed on at the start of the show. If there are changes to be made, which means you're going past the agreed scope or past the agreed timeline or past the budget, there is more formal approval required to do that, because that often means more money. Predictive project management is also heavily driven by various types of planning at the start of the project. So there's a lot of planning at the very beginning, and then the rest of the project is executing all of those plans. Agile project management, or also known as value-driven or adaptive project management, is an approach to project management where it organizes tasks and tests and produces and retests and reproduces deliverables iteratively. It means that their style is, again, iterative and incremental. So it's more cyclical. It builds on top of the previous. So time and cost constraints are fixed and predetermined, but the scope is flexible as long as it stays within the sprint timeline. Agile project management is also very welcoming of changes. So as long as you can fit it in the sprint, they will hear it. Because of that, it requires less planning. It leans more in managing a backlog of tasks. So you'll hear things like a Kanban board. Because of that, comparing those 2 approaches, show production leans more towards predictive project management. And you will see that because show production is linear and sequential. In a show production, you have departments and task dependencies that require it to be planned in a waterfall schedule. Show production has predetermined scope. Scope, timeline, budget bids must be approved for a show to be awarded or greenlit for production to start. Show production is also very change averse. Changes to the scope, or if you need additional resources or more cost, or the schedule extensions, all of that will require approval from producers and execs or the client. And show production is very much project plan driven. Even though it doesn't have as standardized or formalized plans as other industries, some form of show planning is happening at the start of the show, and it's typically done by the production managers and the producers. Agile is something that you'll hear more from tech or software industries, or if you have a tech department, they lean more toward agile. But I will say that show production does have a little bit of agile processes in it, and you'll see this in version iterations. But overall, the show production will be more predictive or waterfall. By the way, if you're new to production management or project management and everything I've said in this chapter is totally new and maybe borderline scary, there is a glossary down below on the course page. And I've also linked you to a very good resource by Chris Croft where he goes over project management in 8 minutes. But I'm curious what you think. Are you familiar with both of these approaches, and do you have a preference? Have you worked in an agile workflow? What are your thoughts in applying agile workflows in production? Let me know in the comments, or you can share it in chat. So if the first chapter sounds all businessy to you, you're not hallucinating. A studio is, after all, a business. And you'll find through your life in production that more and more business terms get thrown at you. Maybe someone in town hall saying things like ROI or a lean business model. Or maybe a supervisor and a producer would be discussing economies of scale, laws of diminishing returns. So if you go in the course page, there's a drop-down menu there where I've collected some of the business terms that I've encountered myself through different productions. I won't be covering them in this video. Let me know in the comments if you want a separate video where I discuss more of the business concepts. Otherwise, it's all there on the page, free to access, and it's a reference for you the next time you hear them at work. Chapter 2, Show Life Cycle. What happens throughout show production? The more you know about your show, the better you will be at communicating. It shows that you know what you're talking about, and that gains trust. Gaining trust within a team makes communication all that much smoother, and problem solving becomes more collaborative when there is trust in the team. And who doesn't want that, right? So you'll definitely want to get to know your show. Okay, so we'll start with show progression. So these are the sequence of events within a show's life cycle, and we can use the milestones to pinpoint the different stages. So what is a milestone? A milestone is a checkpoint or event during show production that signifies a specific progress or goal. Bidding would be one of your first milestones. So it is a milestone in show production when the studio researches possible projects to work on. The studio assesses which projects aligns with their current goals and if it's feasible within its current timeline and the resources. When the studio looks for work, does it fit with the timeline they have? Do they have enough time to do the work? And do they have enough people and resources to do the work? So once they find one, the studio selects multiple possible shows to bid on. So they're going to go to those clients like, hey, if we do this project for you, this is how much it will cost. So then the studio estimates how much work it will require and determines the cost of production, how much the studio needs to fund the project, so how many staff would they need, how much they have to pay. So that's the cost on the studio. So based on that cost, then they can give a price to the client. We would need this much money to fund this project so that we can pay our people, our resources. So in bidding, the studio submits a proposal to the client that owns that show. And then the client assesses the bids and receives them from multiple vendors. Before a show is awarded, which we'll talk about next, client will receive different vendors, different studios will be bidding for the same project. And then based on the lowest proposal, they'll choose one. Okay, so on to the next milestone, which is award. So award is a milestone in production when the client chooses which shots, sequences, episodes, or the whole show will go to which studios, and work is then awarded to the selected studios. Sometimes a show will be given like 100% to one studio, but oftentimes there are multiple vendors for the same show. So they will award this sequence to Studio A and this sequence to Studio B, or maybe shots from 1 to 100 goes to Studio A, but shots from 100 to 200 goes to Studio B. So it just depends on how they're trying to spread out the work. The next milestone is a turnover. So turnover is a milestone in production when the contracts between the client and the studio, or what we call a vendor, are finalized. So they have agreed on the work that will needs to be done and who's doing it. So the studio receives the production materials needed to begin work. So for VFX folks, this is like the plates. I do want to note that even if a studio is working on an internal project, so it's not a client's IP, the production team will still need sequences approved by producers or executives before they can be turned over for show production. So even if we're not working with clients, let's say everything is internal, the project is internal, we can still use the milestone for turnover as a way to note that a producer has approved work for that sequence. The next milestone is pre-production. So milestone when work begins in the earlier phases of the show. So you'll see scripts, voice records, music, even though the music is still temp, art or design department, storyboards, editorial, those will get started. Next is asset production. So especially if you are working with CG, this is a milestone when CG or asset work formally begins. So modeling gets started, rigging, then look dev. Sometimes, depending on the crew expertise and the availability, CG work can also begin during the art phase. Some artists use CG software like Blender to help speed up the process and concept design. You can sometimes also see lighting departments start in asset production. That's because the look dev is very dependent on lighting. Assets do not look correct without proper lighting. So sometimes within asset production, you'll see lighting also start. Next milestone is shot productions. This is a milestone when shot work formally begins. So you'll see layout, animation, shot filing, matte painting, groom, CFX, creature dev, effects, and editorial. One of the last milestones is when post-production begins. So this is a milestone when the back-end departments begin work. So you'll see lighting, comp, QC, editorial, DI. Then you go again with sound, music, final mix, and final delivery. In episodics, you'll find that while one episode is further along in the path, an episode that is much later in the production order could just be starting out in the path. So they're not all happening at the same time. So why is knowing the show life cycle important? It's important because knowing the show life cycle and where you are currently in the project schedule will help you drive conversations at work. Other departments look to production to provide a check-in point or give them information of where we are currently, what's our current standing. Knowing that will give them, especially supervisors, more informed decision making when it comes to things like assessing if we still have time to address something, if we have time for a certain type of methodology, or if they need to reassess a task based on upcoming work. So in production, it's very, very helpful to be in the know of where exactly we are in the schedule so that you can partner with supervisors and give them advice on a path forward. Chapter 3, show information. What you need to know about your project. So besides the show life cycle, there's also a whole bunch of other things that you need to know about the project. You need to know the show alias. So what is it? It's the code name for the show, and it's usually not the same as the published show title released to the public. Let's say the movie is called, I don't know, Purple Planet, and then the show code could be Potato. And then the alias would be POT, pot. I don't know, I just completely made that up, but that's what I mean when sometimes the actual published title has no relevance to the alias that we pick. But there is usually just don't know about it. So the questions that to ask is, what is the show's code name? What's the show alias or the abbreviation? For fun, how did the project end up with the code name? Sometimes there's a really fun story of how the Purple Planet became Potato. And then any other naming convention to note. Next, you want to know the show scope, so a clear description of what we're expected to deliver. So your project manager or your production manager will know this. Question to ask: what's the scope of the show? How many episodes? How many shots? What are we expected to deliver? How many seasons or episodes? Are there any shots or sequences or episodes that will be shared with another vendor? Are there any assets that will need to be ingested from another vendor? Or is there a reuse library that we can use? Sometimes that helps with the scope. So instead of building new things, maybe there's a library where we can reuse, so we're not having to add more to the cost. Another show information you should know is the show schedule. So what is the show schedule? It's not the calendar per se. It's not the calendar with all the meetings. Show schedule is the overall timeline for each department and when they're expected to start and end. So usually this looks like a waterfall or a Gantt chart, and it will include departments, dates, milestones, dependencies, which sequence needs to be done before the next sequence, or which department needs to happen before the next one. Questions to ask are: where does the overall show schedule live? Is it accessible anytime? How often is it updated? How is it updated? And who updates it? You'll always have to know the most recent schedule. That's how you're going to schedule your task for your department more accurately. The next show information you should know is the show calendar. Calendar that reflects all the show's meetings. So can you access that show calendar? Can you edit it? What's the process in requesting for a meeting to be booked? Are your supervisors on multiple shows? Because that will affect which calendars you should look at when you're booking things, because you don't want them to have overlapping meetings and then they end up not showing up in your meeting. Can you have a visibility to your supervisor's calendar? Is there a facility calendar for operational meetings that don't get booked in the show meeting calendar? Maybe sometimes they're invited in an interview, but you won't see that in your show calendar, but that could overlap in your meetings. And does your supervisor have recurring overlapping meetings? Maybe there's a department-wide meeting that they're a part of. Do you know when that is? Number 5, show dates and deadlines. So you need to know the important dates that all tasks and milestones must schedule towards. What are the show's milestones? Any delivery dates for your assigned department? Any specific dates when sending to clients? Is there a cutoff time? When are the final delivery dates? Any important dates before the final delivery? Is there a trailer that we need to deliver, or a teaser, or maybe there are some marketing deliveries that we need to send? What is the show's release date to the public? And as a bonus, speaking of dates, you may also want to ask for any recurring client call dates, so you know when to expect notes. Any important dates for the production team to know, like mandatory in-studio days, and then significant crew outages, like the supervisor going on vacation, so you can better plan ahead. Another show information you should know is who's who. Ask if there is a who's who list or a chart, a go-to list of key stakeholders and crew members along with their role on the show. So what to ask for is: what is the show's production structure and who's in it? Who is your assigned department? If you're a production coordinator, who is your department supervisor or lead, and who are your artists? Any operational rules that you should know. Are you going to be working closely with artist managers? Who will you be working with the most? And if you're onboarding, do you have a buddy? If you're new to the studio, is there someone that you can go to for questions? Who do you report to and how often? Any show distribution list to know about, like specific email aliases that you should be sending things to, or maybe in ShotGrid, there's a ShotGrid group that you should be using. And then who's who on the client side? Other key roles that you should know is there a VFX supervisor or CG supervisor? Who are your department supervisors and editorial? Production coordinators, it's also a good idea to know your upstream and downstream supervisor and leads, just because you're going to have constant communication with them, especially looking for input and output between your departments. Number 7, another show information you should know is the show database. It's the software or platforms where information about the show's tasks are stored and tracked. What is the show's ShotGrid link, and can you access it? Is there a cheat sheet for statuses to use and what they mean? Is there a guide to refer to for asset, shot, sequence, or episodic naming convention? Is there a local drive that you'll need to access to? If working with other locations or clients, is there a transfer file you'll need access to? Lastly, you should also know the show documentation, written reference of the processes and workflows for the show. So is there a show wiki? In other studios, it's a Confluence. Who updates the show wiki and how often? What is the expectation from you? Are you expected to do some write-ups? Are there any other docs that are most commonly used for the show? So are there Google Sheets that people often use? Is there a Google Drive? Things like that. Alrighty, so we'll take a pause here. This is your 5-minute break. Maybe grab a snack, go to the bathroom, make some tea, maybe coffee if I've already bored you. The next chapters will be on schedules and reports. Do what you can to stay awake. Maybe do some jumping jacks, I don't know, get your heart pumping. But I'll see you here in 5 minutes. Welcome back. We've got 3 more chapters to go, and we'll start right now. Chapter 4, Show Schedule and Resource Management. What you need to know to get the show done. I will start by saying that it is the production manager's job to create a show schedule, but it is the production coordinator's job to maintain it. The basic concept of scheduling is to ensure that there is enough resources or crew and time to complete a task by a certain date. I will say that production assistants are rarely scheduling tasks besides calendar management. Production coordinators, 100% you will expect being scheduling tasks. You'll need to know your show schedule and milestones. So what are you scheduling towards? What are the targets or need by date? How much total time does a department have for a specific sequence or episode? Task bids or assignments, as I mentioned, this is something that you need to gather with your supervisors. How much time would a task take an artist according to the department soup, and who should a task be assigned to according to the department of lead? Because sometimes, depending on who a task is assigned to, that time could be longer or shorter. You'll need downstream department date. When does the next department after you need your stuff? When does the next department need the output from your assigned department for that particular shot or asset? And you'll also need to know your upstream department dates. Your department can't start without the output of the previous department, right? Our departments have dependencies. So your assigned department will need the output of the preceding department as an input for their own task before work can begin. So will the upstream departments complete their task by the time your assigned department needs to start their task? This is when you start looking for inventory. Do you have enough inventory for your department to be able to begin work at the time that it's scheduled to begin? You'll also need key shots. So are there specific shots that will need to be scheduled ahead of other shots so that they can figure out the look before they start changing all these other similar shots? It's just a lot more efficient working on key shots first before the rest of the show. The key shots are scheduled early in order for the team to get early feedback on the expectations and approval requirements of a certain sequence or beat or scene. Find out if there are key shots for the whole show or the episode or sequence, and or if the department has their own key shots that will be requested to be prioritized for their own departmental needs. Sometimes there would be shots that are important for a specific department, let's say effects. Maybe this is an effects that they've never done before, so they would like to have this shot scheduled ahead of time, but it might not necessarily be a show key shot. It's not as important for other departments. It's something to consider. You'll still have to schedule show key shots ahead of time, but is there room to also pull that effects key shot so that you can request from upstream, hey, just so you know, can you also prioritize this shot? When scheduling, you also need to know the crew plan. How many artists and leads will be active in your department and by when? Is there enough or too little number of people to complete all the required tasks? If not everyone has the same start date, when are the rest of the crew starting? When are they expected to roll off? Will tasks be completed by the time artists roll off the show? So there's going to be a lot of math here. We'll go over some of that later, but you're trying to find out if you have enough people to do the work during the timeline that you're expected to do work. Inventory, are there enough tasks that are ready to start or that can be worked on for the number of crew active in your department? So you don't want so many artists that are just idle, right? Because then you're just billing to the show with no output. Or are there a lot of tasks still waiting feedback or upstream output, and the crew is at risk of being idle? So is there a conversation that needs to be had if we need to push start dates on artists until we have more inventory? What you also need when you're scheduling is ShawGrid or some type of similar task management app. So this is a place where you can put bid, assignments, and a way for you to schedule tasks and track their process. And then you'll also need a target spreadsheet or email. You export this weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what your production manager prefers. You view the expected task to be worked on, and then you send it to the crew every start of the week, ideally. Targets are a list of tasks that you send to your team, listing what is expected to be done for that current week, just so everyone is aligned on the goals for that week. So production coordinators, you'll also sometimes hear scenarios. So scenarios are a proposed schedule for the production manager or the producers to review. Sometimes they will task you, this many people, we have this much bid, this much work. Can you propose a schedule? So you're going to propose a scenario. What if we do some OT work? What is that scenario like? Can you put that schedule together? Or maybe you're suggesting that we do need more people to do the work. We don't have enough crew. Okay, then provide a scenario showing that. So again, production coordinators, you're gonna have to do math here. Okay, so tips for beginners. When you're starting to schedule, you need to know your department target, milestone, delivery date. You need to consider the holidays when scheduling because no work will be done during those holidays unless there's OT. You need to consider artist vacations and if tasks will be reassigned or delayed. Do you need coverage for that vacation, or is everyone okay that some tasks will be delayed? You need to consider your upstream end dates and your downstream start date. If you're a department that is sandwiched between departments, this is very important. When you're starting to schedule, you need to schedule in broad strokes first before adjusting details because it's very painful to have done all these nitty-gritty and then when you took a step back to look at the big picture, it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. So I highly recommend when you're scheduling to do broad strokes first and then you get more detailed. On the course page, I've included a handy formula for you that might be useful when you're scheduling. And some bonus tip as well is to look into historical data. So consider post-mortem notes from a previous show or maybe from another coordinator who's done this department before. Do they have any tips? Let's say you're in the middle of production now and you are tasked to update a schedule. Some tips for beginners are letting your downstream departments know the key changes, especially if there are any pushes in your departments. They need to know because you are their upstream. They need to know when you're ending. If you're pushing, that means their start date is also pushing. Are there any trends in artist time log? Is there someone who is consistently going overbid? Maybe they need more support. Any delays that will need to be flagged to leads or supervisors, or any opportunities for more assignments. If someone is moving through tasks quickly, so the opposite. If someone is really rocking it and they're completing tasks much earlier than expected, maybe they can help that other person who needs more support. One thing that has helped me personally is, especially when it gets overwhelming, is to think that it's okay to start with, I don't know what I'm doing, or how I'll get there. Because I find scheduling as a bit of a game, like it's a puzzle or it's a Tetris game. And then eventually it works out. But also, though, I will say that you gotta know where you're intending to go. So yes, you don't know what you're doing right now or how you're gonna get there, but you need to know the goal. What is the intention of making this scenario? What are you trying to get at? You gotta have a direction, and then figuring it out is the fun part. Okay, another tips for beginners when it comes to presenting a schedule. Let's say you have a scenario now, a couple of scenarios that you want to present to your production manager. Highlight any notable overages and be prepared to provide info on what caused that delay. So maybe when you're reporting, maybe before the scenarios, you're reporting of what the current status is of the department, and there are overages. So you need to speak to why that happened. When you're reporting and you're presenting, avoid being overly verbose because the information becomes unclear because it gets muddied by all the words that you use. Reports should be quick to read and stick to the data and facts. A lot of times with scheduling, you will be using Excel or Google Sheets or ShotGrids. I won't be covering those in this video or in this series, but I do have ShotGrid tutorials and soon to be Google Sheets tutorials if you look at this link. I'm also thinking of doing a separate video for scheduling strategies. And if you don't want to miss those, make sure to click on subscribe and the bell button to not miss it. Chapter 5. Show metrics and reports. What you need to know to accurately assess the progress of the show. So I have a little gift for you. If you're on the course page, at the very top where it says gear check, I've put together a bunch of formulas that you can use when you're tracking metrics on your show. So I hope that could be helpful to you. So speaking of metrics, let's start with that. So show metrics, how the progress of the show is measured and tracked. You'll hear things like KPI, which is key performance indicators. These are used to evaluate progress. For example, if we are tracking schedule. So an example of KPI, something that we track, is percentage of completion, or we're tracking the number of episodes we've delivered so far, or how many of the milestones have we completed. So some of the example formulas you'll see is maybe you're calculating for the percentage of completion. So, or maybe you're calculating the schedule variance. Another show metrics that you would be tracking is the scope, the total asset count per episode. Are we going over then the agreed scope? Tracking the budget. So possible KPIs would be the percentage of the total bid used up based on the time logged, on how much time is left remaining. So any overages in the budget, or maybe there are tasks that maybe have been underbid or overbid. Asset count, like I said earlier, you need to know how many assets you're allowed per episode, for example, and how many assets are being asked. You could be looking at total number of new assets and reused assets, the number of characters, sets, props per episode, or the number of assets that you've completed. You could be looking at the shot quota. So every week you send out a targets email for your team, and then at the end of the week, do you need to calculate how many of that targeted shots were actually completed, counting shots completed per week or the number of shots missed and pushed, so in order to see if there's a trend. For example, if the team is consistently missing targets, maybe it's not the team, maybe there really is just not enough crew to be able to complete the number of tasks that you've targeted. Maybe the target itself is not realistic. Another metric is overtime. So possible KPIs would be the amount of overtime required to complete targets and the amount of overtime spent. With tracking metrics, you need to be able to tell that to someone who has authority to approve changes, and that's where show reports come in. So show reports is how the progress of the show is communicated. So it's great, you have all these data and numbers, what do you do with them? Some of the reports that you're going to be doing, we're going to be sending out, is the weekly targets. So weekly targets is an email listing what artists are expected to work on for the current week. And it's important because it ensures that the correct priorities of tasks are followed, and it helps set expectations. And you usually send this to your department artist, your lead, and your supervisor, and you CC your production team as well. And then targets emails you usually send once a week on Mondays. Sometimes I like to do a midweek update so that my other production peeps know when something is pushing. Schedule scenarios, so it's a proposed schedule of tasks. So it's important so that you are able to confirm if the suggested end dates of tasks are aligned with upstream and downstream task dates. Does your department schedule work and make sense with your other departments surrounding your department? And putting together scenarios also ensures that department dates are feasible within the overall show schedule. A report that you might be familiar with is end of week report. So this is a captain's log of important department notes from that week. So typical components would be crew or updates, outages, quota, delays, any small wins, flags, and delivery summaries. It highlights key information that may affect the following week. This is typically sent just within your production team, and it's sent at the end of the week on Fridays. For production assistants, you might be tasked with delivery email. When working with clients, standardized emails are often sent internally and externally that provides details requests for a particular send or delivery. So it is important to have clear communication of what is expected to be sent out. Who is it sent out to? You need to let the editorial team know, your internal production team know, and your external comms. Meetings. So I consider this as a type of report, because sometimes meetings with production team or production managers, you go over the schedule. So you might have some doc or spreadsheet or schedule that you want to share in here. Sometimes it's quicker to flag roadblocks and brainstorm workarounds when discussing things in person. Yes, you have a visual when you're talking about it, and discussing it, that might be more of the face-to-face. Within ShotGrid, there are graph widgets. So these are different types of graphs that can be set up in ShotGrid to display various task summaries. It's important because sometimes, especially in our industry where a lot more people are more visually inclined, it's quicker and more efficient to communicate details visually. So you really got to know your team and find ways to be able to communicate something that is easier for them to digest. Because if you give someone just a spreadsheet with all numbers, no colors, no font, the chances of that being understood very quickly is very low. All right, so a few more tips talking about managing scope creep. So what is a scope creep? Scope creep is changes to the deliverables or requirements that were not planned. So sometimes it's when you've already hit the note or the ask, but someone is still giving feedback to add more to it, more. That is scope creep. Some of the ways to manage that, to contain that, is to verify that the kickback notes are valid. Sometimes is that note for your department to address? Maybe it's someone else's problem. Is the note vetted by the show director or the VFX supervisor? Maybe they need to see that first and approve, yes, we will address that. Because maybe they will say, no, we don't have to. Was the asset or shot already approved previously? And if so, are the notes approved to be addressed? So you're gonna have check with production, your production manager. This task was closed before, this was approved before, are we approved to open up again because of this note? Another way to manage scope creep is to confirm that there is enough time to address the note, because sometimes it could be as easy as we don't have time to address it, sorry. You can also confirm if the note is necessary or a CBB, or could be better. So questions to ask is the note absolutely needed, or is the note just commentary? Maybe someone just likes to talk. Will the change affect the look of the show or the story? Can it be addressed as a nice to have down the line? Another way to manage scope creep is to ensure that the scope is clearly defined. So one way is to start from the beginning. Check if there's a doc to refer to or a field in ShotGrid to confirm shot needs. So what was agreed on that we will do and will not do. You can also loop in CG supervisors. CG soups are your best friend when you're managing multiple departments. Will the note affect multiple departments is a question for CG soups. What's the best course of action or methodology to address the note? What is the CG soups will be the ones who best to know on how to address a note most efficiently. Watching for early signs before it becomes a thing. What are the things you can watch out for? So are there any patterns to the notes? Do the clients tend to misunderstand it? Is anyone unclear on the definition of done of a task? And do due dates tend to go past because of kickback notes? You really have to look beyond of just what you get at face value. You need to look at trends, because maybe what you're getting, the data that you're getting right now could give you early signs of what would it be like in the future. Confirm that a scheduled push is approved. So let's say there is a note, we'll add more time, it will push something, is that approved? Will addressing the note push out due dates for any department? Is production or the client okay with that scheduled push? And what's the downstream impact of that push? These tips are from my experience as a production coordinator and as a production manager. So I have been a production manager, and these are the things that I would give my coords. But I am not your production manager. So each studio will have their own expectations. And so the notes and guidelines I have in this video or in this course are my own suggestions. So it may not be applicable to all. And you made it to the final chapter, roles and responsibilities and the project management skills tied to them. So now that you've got a bit more context of what production does, the pieces that make up production and what we do, the type of information that we handle, here's a list of what we do and the project management skills that you need to do them well. So these are the roles and responsibilities that we covered in day one, but this time I'm highlighting the project management skills that apply to each. I will say that what I share in this video is only a very small sample, but if you're looking for the project management skills for all of those hundreds of tasks, I do have an extended version which will be available for download at the end of the summer. It will be a paid product, but I promise it's very, very affordable. It's the price of a coffee or bubble tea. If you found value in Soyumri Prod and the content that we've produced over the years, and you would like to support me in some way, I would really, really appreciate it. I love bubble tea. Okay, so let's go through the list. So these are some of your roles and responsibilities that you've seen in the previous video. And then over to the right, I will go over the process groups for my PMI trained people. This might be familiar to you, or some of the project management competencies that you need for these tasks. So for example, when you're managing and maintaining show calendars, you would need to practice meeting facilitation skills. When you're following through with offboarding tasks or even onboarding tasks, some project management competencies would be being able to look for lessons learned or postmortem notes, or you need to process documentation. When you're relaying information and data between departments, you might be looking at skills in stakeholder management. How do you manage information between different people and making sure that everyone's aligned? When you type out meeting notes or review notes, that is also stakeholder communication, making sure that everyone has the info they need in a timely manner. When you're organizing team events, you might be practicing project closing. What are the tasks related to that process group, right? Like in closing, that could be logging lessons learned or postmortem, processes and steps that relate to releasing the team. When you're facilitating deliveries to clients, you could be practicing skills in quality control or controlling the scope. We talked about how to manage scope creep. When you're providing asset breakdowns and based on scripts or animatics, what is the work breakdown structure? What's the scope and risk management plan there? When you support supervisors when they're bidding, assigning tasks, and setting targets, you might need to practice your scheduling management skills or resource planning. When you're communicating tasks or statuses or ETAs by shot grid, you might need to know KPIs and milestone tracking or status reporting, making sure that things are accurate, timely, and clear. All right, you did it. How are you doing? I hope you're still awake. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all the math and all the words. If I did, if you dozed off, you happen to doze off, it's okay. I don't take it personally. So here's a recap. And if you're following the course, this is now your day 2 of the summer camp. Please let me know what you think. I'd love to know how you're finding the summer camp so far. I do learn from you as well so that we can continue to better so you'll be prod for other production peeps out there in the future. So if you're on the course page, there's additional goodies for you at the bottom. You can check out the prod tips. As some of you know, I post daily tips on our Instagram. So in the prod tips, I've collected all of the relevant tips so far for this particular episode, as well as some additional resources. And I will say it might be worth coming back to in later days, because as I find more resources later on, I do continue to add and update the course page. So it's worth revisiting. We end our days here like we end our meetings, with action items. So today's action items are, number 1, take a look at your latest resume. Based on your previous experience, could it be that there are project management skills that you've already exhibited in those past tasks? Maybe you can revamp your resume to highlight that, because now it's very clear that project management skills are very applicable in production management. Number 2, try out the formulas. If you're already in production, you can try to use it in your next report, or if you're not, maybe you can do a mock-up. And to tie it back to the story at the beginning of this episode, if production really was all about data, this video would be a lot shorter and a lot more boring. So I hope in some way I was able to shed some light on how we as a production team are able to support through the human side of it that absolutely requires creativity, especially in a way we find the information. Sometimes you have to be resourceful in finding out how or where. And I hope I was also able to share that there is creativity too in looking for ways on how we individually are able to understand data and how others understand data and come up with different plans or options on presenting that data. And I hope I was able to provide some tips on the different ways that you can communicate or present data, because everyone's brain is different, everyone's way of understanding data is different. So I hope I was able to give you some tools, and you in your own way can find a creative way to communicate that best works for your team. Our next video is going to be about domain skills, or the industry specific skills in production management. So these are things that you won't learn from any other industry, so you don't want to miss that. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button to know when that video drops. As you know, So You Want to Be Prod's mission is to spread support for production everywhere. And one of the ways that you can help the mission is by sharing these resources with someone who might need it. I hope you learned something new today that you could use to help someone else. Because at the end of the day, your greatest resource is each other. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!